Okay. And we are waiting for one, and we have the minutes
We
from
have quorum.
April. Sorry, what'd you say?
We have quorum.
All right, let's do it. So we are going to go over the consent agenda. We have action items there, approving minutes from April 2025 and May 2nd, the executive committee. So I would, can I do them together, or do I need to do separate motions?
You can do them together.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
that's okay.
I would like to solicit a motion to approve the minutes from April 2025 and May 2nd, 2025.
So moved.
So moved.
Okay, we got to move in a second, and can all in agreement?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone need to abstain? Okay. All right. Okay. So we do have a plan regarding Lindsay, but actually before Lindsay joins, or before we turn it over to Lindsay, we did get a letter from the governor. So I want to tee this up just a little bit. As many of you know, we have been working to make sure that we are in line with the governor's priorities. And I have had the opportunity to meet with Sarah fairly regularly to talk about this. And we want to make sure that, and I think I talked about this in our first strategic planning session, that the governor is our client, is really our primary client as far as what the governor needs from us to more effectively manage the workforce system.
Was a concept introduced in and other people of color.
I think we have somebody. Okay, there we go. Somebody off mute. So as a result of those conversations, Sarah met with the governor and talked a bit about, and this is really at our request to try to understand how we can best support and how we can best be of support to the governor. And this does dovetail a bit with some of the strategic planning and scorecard work we're kind of pretty far down the road on, but I want to turn it over to Sarah to talk a little bit about the letter from the governor that I think was emailed out. I know I got it, but it was emailed out to folks, and you may not have had time to really look at it, but I want to kind of let Sarah describe in her own words, as opposed to me interpreting the letter. So Sarah, do you have a moment to give us your insight?
Yeah, absolutely. So just appreciate the space to share a little more. And I had the opportunity to sit down with Sherry and Venkat earlier today. But as I've been engaged with this group in this capacity, I've heard kind of loud and clear, like, hey, what would be useful to Governor Kotek as we do our work and think about the next iteration of our strategic plan and what kind of metrics we want as part of that strategic plan. And how can we be most effective as a board, and what kind of information would be useful to the governor. And I have the absolute pleasure of working for a governor that not only reads my memos, but then reads all of the reports and past work of the board, and gets in the weeds enthusiastically. And so I just want to share that as she's read all of the continuous improvement committee reports and really just applauds the work that you all have done. I think a volunteer board putting in that kind of work, it just shows your commitment to a more equitable workforce system. So I'll say that. I'll also say she acknowledges the challenge when our work, and I think this is shared often in the reports of the workforce dollars being in different places and managed by different entities, and the challenge that can be when you're thinking about performance and accountability and metrics and alignment within the workforce system. So just want to share that she understands the challenge that you all have, and also is really interested in particular in how we're using our public workforce system dollars to serve people. Because at the end of the day, I think the WTDB is really in service of your clients. While I don't think they're necessarily the governor, I think they're the people of Oregon, and wants to really lean into your statutory authority around our public workforce system. So, when the governor asked me, like, hey, how's our public workforce system performing? I can answer that question. And you all can help me answer that question for the governor. And so that's the really premise of this letter, is to really direct you to lean into that statutory authority when you think about this strategic plan and the metrics associated with that strategic plan. I want to acknowledge that may feel limiting based on the conversations that I've heard the board have around stretch goals and metrics and kind of the broader workforce system. So I'm not here to discourage you to not necessarily think about those things in the future, but hope that we can have a laser focus on the public workforce system and accountability within that system. That includes state agencies and all of the state agencies that include WIOA funding. That also includes the local boards. So really wanted to lean into that, knowing that in the future, once we can really kind of wrap our heads around, okay, how is the public workforce system performing, that we can then lean into some other more stretch goals and measures. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Sarah. I'd like to scroll down if you can, whoever has the letter up. Yeah, if you can scroll to near the end there. So I think it's page 2. Are we on page 2? Yeah. So I want to highlight this area here that it says to support, or actually, let's start above that. Metrics and reporting should look at WIOA programs across the state enterprise, including Title 1s, 2, 3, 5, or 4 and 5, and including state funding where applicable. And then the governor here says, to support this effort, I will be directing state agencies and local workforce boards with WIOA funding to actively engage in setting these metrics, commit to sharing data, and orient their efforts to continuous improvement. Another piece of this letter seems to be, and Sarah, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, is that this board will take on the recommendations of the KIC and look at assessment of that, and that's higher up in the letter. So I don't know. I just want to make sure to highlight that for folks. But what this does mean is, and Sarah's discussion around a laser focus would mean that some of the metrics and things that we have been teasing out these last few months might go to the side or might be more secondary as these other metrics focusing on the workforce system take more center stage. And so that I just want to make sure that that is it. And oh yeah, this is on page 1. It says the most recent continuous improvement committee report recommends standing up a unified and consolidated reporting system for statewide performance metrics. By this letter, I'm directing WTDB to stand up the reporting system and associated metrics. So that would have us take on this role that is statutorily specific. But again, it would narrow some of the performance metrics we've talked about. So I want to open this up as opposed to me just talking, because it is like new information for people on the committee. So I want to open it up for any questions I can answer. And Sarah, if you have a few minutes, if questions anybody has. Steve?
So this is a very exciting letter because in order for us to carry out our role, then that means that we need to be able to assess a lot of data and information, which means that we have to rely on others in making that information available in a digestible format so that we can, take it all in and then the way that I understand the different people who are on the workforce board who represent different industries, then they can actively participate in the discussion. And then the question becomes, how does that get conveyed? But the accountability and having access to data is really, really important, because I just recently put in a information request. I was looking for all of the reports from the local workforce boards for the last 5 years and then IRS filings, so I could start to get a good understanding of what their programs are, where the funding had been going, and then zero in on what funding had been allocated for construction and who got it. So be able to have that data and to be able to analyze it can help us align the system better. So I'm really, really excited about this letter.
Thank you. You get anything on that, Sarah?
No, thank you, Steve. That's great.
Anne?
Similar comments, really awesome to see that letter. And Sarah, thank you for all the legwork, and Sherry, you too, and Ben Cat for getting us, to this place. I think it's awesome. I suspect we should give ourselves a little room. And Sherry, I think you touched on this too, that as we kind of get into like what our plans were for this next year, I think that this, because it's now really sanctioned by the governor, we could find ourselves in a place where we have a lot on our plate and who's going to do the work, et cetera. So I think we should just be mindful of that as we're finalizing things to make sure that we're prioritizing just the right things. And then if there's some things we need to move, I think that that's probably inevitable. That's going to happen.
And I'll just share, I acknowledge that there's some detail that needs to be worked out around, and the governor is very clear around directing state agencies and local boards. And so, I look forward to working with you on how our office can be supportive in that endeavor.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier today, and I said any financial help, and I know budgets are tight, but any financial help that can help us actually execute, because it can be difficult. As I think everyone knows, agencies are very busy, people are already stretched, and here we come with something they may or may not feel like they have time for. So how do we get that information? It's tricky. So anyone else, any other questions? This does have an impact on our planning, however. So we were going to vote today on some strategic imperatives. However, we may need to reevaluate our strategic imperatives in light of this, because once again, the governor's request really focuses on our WIOA statutorily, requested, which some of our current imperatives may loop a little farther afield from that. And so I hate to put Lindsay in a different position today than she thought she was going to be in. So Lindsay, I know you can't on the fly figure it out, but what process do you think might be helpful for us given this new information as far as reviewing what we have? Would it maybe in the time we have, it might be useful to at least start the conversation about what might be far afield based on this, as opposed to, oh, we're going to narrow it down. We might just look and say, okay, what might be a little far afield given this new information. And then I suppose it would be upon us to come back and try to address this. So we do have an hour of time set aside before Jennifer is going to come and do a presentation. And I'm curious, Lindsay, what you think might be the best use of this time.
Sure. No, I'm happy to wing it. I think that's totally doable. I mean, the timing in some ways couldn't have been worse and couldn't have been better, right? I mean, we literally were set to approve all of the work you've done. I think in a really transparent and open way, you know, for 4 months. And then this letter arrived the same 24 hours, right? So same, I think comments and thoughts that I have, as you have all shared, is that amazing to get a letter and to get some guidance from the governor, right? Because that's better than not getting anything at all, right? And so I think honestly, when I look at your scorecard as of last night, right, and I really do want to emphasize, you know, you all have spent so much thoughtful time on this, you know, for the past 4 months, and it has been done in what we hope is a really open and transparent process. But the letters governor certainly changes, like you suggest, the scope of this, right? To be fair, for all of you that filled out the survey, only 2 individuals commented on the scope being too big. All others wanted to make sure that you were both being bold and on the right track. So I think when you then balance this with the letter that you just received, and I don't know if you can squint and see this, you all also have the version that I sent out last night, but I think probably what you're looking at here.
Just FYI, Lindsay, we can't see anything. This is,
Oh.
it can't display presentation. There was a
Oh,
problem
shoot.
displaying content.
Oh, no. Okay. Well, let me stop sharing because it shows up on mine. And then, Aaliyah, can you share?
Lindsay,
would be-
Clay and I can see it okay. So
Oh,
There it
just so
is.
you know, Sherry.
Now,
okay.
now
Aaliyah's
there
got
it
it.
is.
Yeah. Okay.
Venkat,
Awesome.
I'm sorry, Lindsay, real quick. Venkat, did you have a question that I missed? I didn't see a raised hand until just now.
Let me just lower it. Okay. No, Sherry, thank you for the discussion and the before you turned it over to Lindsay. In light of the governor's letter and our priorities, I see that there's also a workforce readiness committee that's part of the WTDB, and they have identified a couple of priorities, one being the employability skills, and the second one being a project for STEM, focusing on STEM. So I don't know if those also need to change in light of this letter. So some clarification around that would be helpful for me. And maybe we don't know the answer right now, but something that we probably need to figure out over time.
Yeah, I guess I would kick that question to Sarah, and because I wouldn't, I'm not sure actually. And maybe that is a question, like you said, Sarah, we have to figure it out as we go.
I don't think we have an answer today on that at all, Venkat. I appreciate you raising it. I think that I think standing up the scorecard and plan can help them drive the work in the committees, though acknowledge that work has already been good work has already been underway. So that's all I'll say, is I don't think we have the full answer yet.
Okay, thank you.
Steve, did you have another question before we let Lindsay kind of take it from here?
Yeah, so where do the consortiums fall into all this? Because they've been tasked with, identifying these employability skills and all this stuff. So where does the consortiums, the industry consortiums, fall into this process? and they're all operating under the WIA.
I think, again, I don't have an answer to that. I think that it's for discussion at a future meeting, but I don't know if Sherry.
No, I mean, I feel like the consortiums are a key element of our insight into different industries and really having a, a, a roadmap as to what we're looking for and what the stressors are. So it seems to me that they're quite important. So that's my opinion, but I don't know how that jives. Yeah. So Lindsay, I want to turn it back over to you. Sorry for that. I just didn't see the hands.
No problem. That is fine. And actually, I mean, that's related. So Venkat is right to raise the work of the Workforce Readiness Committee because I think it was sort of looked at as the reverse, actually, to what was just said, in that the Workforce Readiness Committee, as the board's most active committee, I mean, I will say that just from my own experience and watching how well attended that committee is. It's kind of a powerhouse of a of a committee. I think the view was, through data and information, we want to sign on to the initiatives that we think are going to have the biggest and largest impact on our immediate, workforce and our long-term workforce. And so, yes, the Workforce Readiness Committee spent also quite a bit of time putting together their plan for the next 2 years, 2025 and 2026. And one of those initiatives is one of the big shared workforce goals that is in this version of the plan and scorecard that the governor's letter does seem to negate, in the fact that it is not hyper-focused on the workforce system. It is a stretch goal of looking at the K through 12 system, and very specifically the very dismal outcomes of 4th grade math, and how can AI support this, and how does the board get behind that. So these are really important, in fact, implications, because both the scorecard and the plan as it currently is, as well as the already approved by the committee, but to be approved by the executive committee, Workforce Readiness Charter, will have to be rethought. So before we perhaps get there, I think if you look just at this page 1, right, of the actual scorecard, I think to be aligned with what the governor's letter is focused on, there are some quite simple things you could do. Literally delete "and larger system" from the heading in the 4th column, right? Instead of public workforce and larger system population indicators, you say public workforce population indicators. The imperative number 1, population indicators, hold true to what you want to see happen, right, in the public workforce system. And they are very thoughtful. I would also argue that 2BI under imperative number 2 holds quite strongly, right? It is the 2CI and the 2DII or 2D1, 2, that need to be rethought, right? Now, you all chose these as stretch goals, as how do we influence, positive student outcomes at the K through 4 level, for example, and how do we influence access to Oregonians' access to affordable housing, because you saw, the housing report, and for example, the data that Venkat has brought to the committee, the Workforce Readiness Committee, that these were huge barriers to the Oregonian workforce pipeline, right? So, but if you are to align with the governor's requests, those two, do you, you have to decide this. Do you nix them, right? Is this just too much beyond our scope? Now, again, this was already asked in 2 rounds of surveys. And 80% of you wanted some version of influencing and impact on these. But that was before the governor's letter, right? So I think there are easy ways to slim this down and pull back in order to align with the governor's letter. The next page, Aaliyah, if you will go to that one, I think quite similarly, there's not a lot, there's nothing to change here except the heading, because truly 3B, increase customer awareness and satisfaction, including brand and program awareness. You want that for your public workforce system, right? And so you can remove the larger system language and verbiage. And this is going to be impactful, and it is going to be aligned with what you all have said still matters to you. So again, Aaliyah, if you go back to the first page, because I think that is, you all know that's, oops, sorry, not the first, the middle page, the second page, thank you. This is the one, right? And it really is that bottom right-hand corner there related to the Workforce Readiness Committee's work, and then the housing affordability that you would need to truly rethink. So I will stop there because I do think you all do have some, I would say, hard decisions to make. Maybe they're not. Maybe they really are. Let's just pull back and go with what we've got. It's still going to be a scorecard, quite honestly, that is more than this board has had in the past. I mean, you have taken some big strides and leaps here. So I think that's where I will end and open it back up. Sherry, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we have been very effective with our first scorecard. When I look back on that first scorecard we did, we achieved all those goals. So I don't think the board has been off its imperatives in that regard. I am mindful of the fact that, again, this is a volunteer board and people have put a tremendous amount of time into this, from surveys to work groups to hours-long meetings. And so I'm sensitive to that. And I am disinclined to ask people to go through another extensive amount of rounds in this way. I have a preference myself, but I'll save that for a minute. And I see Todd has his hand up.
Oh, thanks, Sherry. Lindsay, since we got you, I know this is a wrinkle that you weren't expecting. I'm just wondering if you could say a little bit more on your current thoughts. Maybe they'll develop as the meeting goes on. But as I think about all the great work that you helped us with in the Workforce Readiness Committee, which has got public workforce partners in there, but obviously the scope isn't just about the public workforce system. Sort of given what you've just learned, what are some of the things that you could envision moving forward with that group still intact? Because I do think that, to your point, Sherry, there's been a lot of board members as well as other partners that have been very engaged in that committee and have done a lot of good work aligning across this system. So I'd just be curious, anything else you might have to say about that, Lindsay, sort of future forward.
Well, I would say, and this is just also based on my experience with other state boards, I'm not just flattering you when I say that the Workforce Readiness Committee is exceptionally strong. And I think that there is a deference, right, that should be included here to how strong it is and how motivated they are as a group, because that does not always happen, as you all know, right? From sitting on probably many boards, right, of all sorts. And I think also as a volunteer board, you all know better than anyone how important it is to take advantage of motivation by volunteer board members around specific issues and topics. And so when I look at that board charter, and I think that might be something, Aaliyah, not to keep putting you on the spot, but to pull up as well, because the board charter, the workforce readiness charter, wow, she's good. Thank you. So it's very thoughtful. It is thoughtful not only in the purpose and the history and how the committee got to making the decisions that it has made for 2025-26, but very thoughtful in the two major initiatives that it chose. And so if you scroll down, Aaliyah, when I think about the
Lindsay,
future, yes.
Sorry to butt in, but
it's okay.
Just FYI, if Ben's still on, we are in the process, we being Charlie Hopewell and I, in reaching out to those executive sponsors that are listed at the top of the charter. That is the only part of the charter that is not official yet. So I just wanted to flag that so folks weren't surprised, Lindsay. Although I have good news in that Charlene Williams just answered my email and has agreed wholeheartedly to be an executive sponsor for the work. So just FYI.
That's great. Thanks, Todd. Yes, important caveats. So you can see that the two high priority key projects that the Workforce Readiness Committee discussed in some length and depth and approved was one, Operation Expand OES, right? And so because of the success already with the Oregon Employability Skills Framework and Curriculum, wanting to really ensure that this gets out there and at the scale that it's needed. And that means partnering with whole new sets of programs and programs that really could expand this to the right target individuals. So that is very, very important ongoing work that the Workforce Readiness Committee wants to prioritize. So if you scroll down, Aaliyah, then you will see, and including action plans, measurable outcomes, et cetera. So for the second one, it is Project STEM Lift. And this one really is, how do we signal and then plan and implement an approach to turning around STEM proficiency very early on in the workforce pipeline. And so this is focused on how do we take advantage and even get ahead, right, of research that has been done nationally around AI tools in the classroom that support teachers who have less and less capacity, right, every year to do effective professional development and implement new math curriculum to really make sure that you're lifting outcomes at a very early age so that the future workforce pipeline of Oregon is more ensured, especially in all of the high priority industry sectors that you all are prioritizing. On the industry consortium, by the way, this was some very important and repeated over and over conversations within the Workforce Readiness Committee of how do we absolutely make sure that we are using the industry consortia to inform and react to what we are doing within not only Expand OES, but really especially within Project STEM Lift, because we are looking at the critical occupations and high priority sectors that we have active industry consortia in, right? Healthcare, manufacturing, energy, technology, What am I missing? Oh, chips. Those are 5 pretty big, important ones for the state of Oregon, right? That are behind this. So, Todd, sorry, this is a very long answer to your question of, what are your thoughts? But my thoughts are, you do want to find a way to build on energy where energy is, and also align with the governor. So what's the balance here that can be struck? So that's probably far more than I need to. This isn't about my opinion. This is also really just, this is where you're at. And so kind of what now? So I'll turn it back over.
So as far as this work, me personally, I don't see this work conflicting with the primary role of the metrics and achieving the results of the letter. I don't see those things necessarily in conflict. But it depends on, the request around execution. But I don't see these things necessarily in conflict, and I see them as, in some sense, complementary, right, to the work that we're doing. And so I would not say that, this baby is thrown out of the bathwater at this point. And so that's what I would say. But as far as the imperatives and the work that we've done, as I said, I am sensitive to the fact that we have asked a lot of people over this last 4 months, and people have shown up consistently and put a lot of effort into this. And so I am hesitant to engage in another round of something of that scale. What I would think might be something to do is to consider, Lindsay, having you take a look at the priority areas and imperatives that we had in context of the letter, and give us a potential proposal that would narrow it for this executive committee to review, and we move from there, I guess, as opposed to opening it up and going back. We've asked a lot of people over the last 4 months, and they have shown up and I'm hesitant to do that again at the point where people felt like they were at the finish line. So, that's my instinct. But Anne, yep.
I'm with you on that. And I wonder, in terms of timing, is there do we need to approve this now? And if Todd says yes, it's supposed to be done by now or whatever, then do we say, fine, we'll approve it as is because of all the work and all the things you just said, Sherry, and then Lindsay comes back with a recommendation, and then we modify it based on that, those recommendations, if we think we need to, if there's like, oh, take this out or do this. I'm just wondering what the timing is. And so I was thinking, well, if you need a vote today, we can vote and keep it as is. And then is there any reason why we couldn't just modify it, in a month or whatever?
I don't think we're not under any statutorial pressure, are we, Todd, to vote on this today? No.
No.
So I think to keep it cleaner, since we're not under any pressure to do the vote today, it would be better to get the revised elements, and then maybe in the executive committee have that discussion once we get those, and then make the decision then to approve whatever that looks like. With the caveat that there are some existing committees and activity that are outside of the system that we think should continue as incubators, but they're not the primary thing that we are doing. Todd?
Thanks, Sherry. Thanks, Anne. And I just wanted to underscore and thank Lindsay for all of her efforts and being flexible, adaptable, and I don't know, I know this is being recorded, but for shucking and jiving with all of the ways this has gone. So thank you, Lindsay. That being said, I know Lindsay is beyond hours on her contract. we were fortunate to be able to go to HEC procurement and get an extension on the contract, but we are tapped out there. So Lindsay, I'm just saying that to flag for everybody. That's another wrinkle in all of this. And I'm not sure what the future holds, but I just wanted to raise that up so everybody was aware of it and be completely transparent.
Well, I mean, I think that given where we are, before that, I'll let Ken go ahead. Ken?
I don't mean to complicate things, but at least I thought I would fill you in on a conversation I had earlier this week with the Manufacturing Institute, which was contacted by the Trump administration to look at ways of having manufacturer employers have more of a direct contact between the Department of Labor and manufacturers in general. And so I get the sense that just like when WIOA was an update to WIA during my first term as chair, that this administration might be making some major changes when it comes to how the Department of Labor interacts with states and employers in those states. So I just think, since we have an advantage of having the Secretary of Labor being from Oregon and an Oregon representative at one time, I think it would be good for the governor's office, and I'm directing to you, Sarah, in particular, to maybe have the governor or yourself reach out to the new Secretary of Labor to see if there are any proposed changes for the coming years. Because I hate to go through some more of this work and have the cards reshuffled again. So I'm just throwing that out there.
I appreciate that request. I can't promise that I will make that request as we work through just challenges with the federal transition. So I'll just say that. What I will say is we are not planning in hypotheticals. We aren't going to know what changes are going to be made and when, and so would not want our board to plan in a hypothetical. I think we're well aware of any potential impacts that may come down, and at this point in time, they are rumors. So just want to state that for the record. I will say that I don't think that. Yeah, that's all I'll say on that.
Yeah,
and that
no,
we're tracking
I'm not
and
trying to
monitoring
put you
that
in,
closely.
I'm not trying to put you in an awkward situation, and I'll be more than happy to forward to you any information. They've told me that they will update me on what they're looking at and changes. But I just, man, that was a shocking phone call to kind of get throughout the week, and to hear about, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe nothing comes from that, but I do know when I was the chair going back for the NGA conferences, the states that had their connection to the secretary at that time had a lot more sway, had a lot more information, seemed to kind of get firsthand knowledge in some ways. And so I just thought we should maybe try to leverage that. I know she has a lot of contacts within our state. But I'm not trying to put you in an awkward situation. I understand it. I'm trying to give you a heads up that there might be something coming down the road. And I'll fill you in with whatever I find out. But it was kind of an unusual phone call. And I have to admit, I kind of looked at it and thought about the work of this strategic plan, thinking things could change slightly. And I don't know what that would really entail, but it was like I said, a conversation that threw me when I got the phone call. And I had a nice conversation. It was a good conversation. And I don't think it was anything that was going to be, super shocking, but definitely there was definitely some conversations going on with the Manufacturing Institute, and they seem to be in the driver's seat at this point.
Well, I think, there is, of course, an open question about WIOA. So, we don't know. Steve?
So Ken, could you articulate again your concern about what you heard?
Well, I think the main concern is they felt, and I think, and I'll be candid, in Oregon there feels like there's a block, especially between like apprenticeship programs within our state and the ability to implement apprenticeship programs, and especially since we have an intermediary with the Bureau of Labor Industries. If there's a blockage there, they're looking at ways of stopping those blockages so that employers have more of a direct pathway. So I just think, I mean, it just seems like they're looking for direct routes to the Department of Labor as opposed to going through state agencies, as opposed, the way things are kind of aligned.
Yeah. So, for me, I'm kind of in a unique situation because I'm on the board. I stood up a consortium, and so I've already thought through a lot of this from a granular level in execution. So to me, it's not a bad thing to give industry more input if they're willing to come and do that. Because one of the things that when Future Ready was first passed and we had a meeting, one of the things everyone agreed upon that industry needed to lead. And so the industry does need to lead. And without them leading, then we end up coming up with theoretical models and data sets that don't actually align with what industry's needs are. So, if they could bring down the barriers that Foley does present in accessing data to help us make informed decisions, to me, that would be a good thing. So like I say, I'm looking at this thing from both the workforce board and then actually having a consortium that have really looked at this at a really granular level. So I kind of go back and forth, and I don't want to go down in the weeds, but that is one thing that I would agree would be important, that industry take more of a lead in us exactly what they need, and then also engage with us to help make it possible.
What I heard Sarah say is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that they are aware of many things and they have some strategy processes that they are engaging in, but that to a certain extent, the pre-planning for what might happen is out of the scope of what we can do. And we have our statutory mandate with WIOA, which is what we're wrestling with right now, as long as and until it exists. I mean, at this point, in this universe that we live in, that's all we can say about anything, as long as and until it cease to exist, is legislated out or whatever. But the request to get this in front of the governor was made, and Sarah, has said what she can and can't do with that. So I think having industry be a big part of what we do is something that we still can get at as a board through our metrics and through our engagement with them and letting them help match up what we think for instance, Steve, the work you were talking about doing yourself, right? Like that is the kind of thing that we as the board could do that would be helpful to industry. But as far as what the governor can do at this moment, being responsive to this particular issue, it sounds like that is something that they will take under advisement and that they have a strategy for, and that's where that is. I do want to circle back around though to finishing out this scorecard and these imperatives. And I think this may be a further conversation Todd and I and Sarah and Ben and Julia might need to have, because given the fact that we did get this letter and we are really grateful for the governor's engagement, but we are at the end of our process and we do not have the staff capacity to redo a large scale project that we might need to see if we can beat the bushes to find some additional funds to wrap this up. Given the fact that we have budgeted for and planned for and worked toward today. So I don't think we can just leave it with, we don't have the funds for Julia because or not Julia, for Lindsay, because that's not a thing. And we can't, none of us are going to give additional time, given the amount of time that people have put into this to take on Lindsay's role to redo this. So given that we do need to synthesize the governor's letter with what we've done, we're going to have a conversation about how we financially get that done. So that may be something we're going to get on the calendar. So that's where we are with that. Lindsay, did you have anything else you wanted to add to this? Well, you're definitely not because you're on mute. You're still on mute. You muted yourself and then you muted yourself back. Yeah, so your computer is out to get you.
There, it's sensitive. It's sensitive. Yes. All that, and I really don't have anything to add. I mean, I think I have taken you as far as I can go, and Todd is right that I have gone over my limit, and so I so much want to see you through this because of all of the work that you have put in, and so I think, Sherry, if your proposal is feasible, then I would love to get you through to the home plate here. So I will.
What would be helpful, I think, is for you to maybe forward to Todd and I a proposal for this limited engagement wrap up to present, and maybe it really is just simply getting us to the point where you present this revised, and then we do take it from there. So let's
Yep.
look at maybe that option, and then you can have an add-on, an extended option that we can discuss. Okay.
Yes, I think that sounds very reasonable.
All right. I don't think we're going to get more on this today. So I don't know if Jennifer Rice is on with us at this point. Is she here already?
Good. Hey, Sherry,
Yeah.
given that everybody's heads are probably hurting a little bit from all
Want to
this,
take a break? Yeah, we can
I
do that.
wonder if we take like a 10-minute break and
Yep.
I'll go see if I can round up Jennifer. I think she might be in a meeting that's happening at the same time, sort of waiting for me
Okay.
to tap her.
Yeah, let's take a 15-minute break because that'll get us closer to a little bit closer
Perfect.
to her time. Okay.
So back at 2:10.
Yeah, that looks right. Is my adding?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. See everybody back at 2:10.
Okay. All right. I think that's about 15 minutes roughly, wouldn't you say? Okay, thumbs up on that. What about Jennifer Rice? Are we thumbs up on that?
She is here.
Awesome. Okay. Jennifer, there you are. So we are going to turn it over to Jennifer, who's going to talk about strategic innovation grants and the governor's reserve grants.
Awesome. So thank you for that. My name is Jennifer Rice, as was previously mentioned. My position is called a Workforce Industry Specialist. And today we're going to go over what the Governor's Statewide Activities Grant is and the Strategic Innovation Grant that the WTDB makes some decisions with. So you can move on to the next slide, please, Leah. So we're going to go over what the heck is the Governor's Reserve Fund. What is the Governor's Statewide Activity Grant, and a little bit more in depth about that. And then the Strategic Innovation Grants. So with the Strategic Innovation Grants, we're going to be going over some of the highlights that of programs that were funded last time. And then the last thing we're going to do is going to be the most exciting part of the whole shebang. We're going to be talking about what direction you'd like to go for the next round of strategic innovation grants. You can move on now, Leah. So the Governor's Reserve Fund is created with WIOA funds that can be reserved and set aside for statewide employment and training activities, which is what we've done here. These funds can be combined regardless of what WIOA program the funding came from. Go ahead and move on. You'll be hearing that a lot because we're going to get through the bulk of this presentation pretty quickly, just so I can give y'all a high level overview of these grants. But I'm hoping that we're able to have a really good conversation about where to go next. So the Governor's Statewide Activities Grant just closed for like last week, which was very focused on the behavioral health workforce and then the housing production workforce, which is primarily construction. This grant's going to go from June 14th of this year to March 31st of 2027, but it was a pretty big investment for $750,000 per project focus area. So $750,000 for behavioral health and $750,000 for housing production workforce. The recipients of this grant is the local workforce development boards, and only one board per focus area was chosen. Move on, please. And the funds that they could potentially use this for, or the activities that they could use these funds for, are the development of training programs, support services and wraparound services for participants. And the goal is industry responsiveness. So what does the industry need in regard to the workforce problems that industry might face? And employer assistance, which could be potentially be like a wage reimbursement. You can move on. The strategic innovation grants through the WTDB were focused on really creating connections with employers and how the K-12 education system affects the workforce system and how these things kind of interplay together. Those joint priorities also include work-based learning opportunities and advancing equity, which is very important for providing opportunities for people who may not have those opportunities or even know that they exist. The last one, and I think is really important to include, is aligning the data with WorkSource Oregon system to find out like what jobs are in demand in any really industry. Thank you. So now we're going to go over very quickly what investments were made in the strategic innovation grants in the past so that you guys know potential opportunities for what we could do in the future. So in the past, which was the 2023 to 2025 biennium, it was Central Oregon Community College's manufacturing pre-apprenticeship program with a focus on rural and priority populations that was funded. A similar program, so that's in Bend, a similar program in Portland through the Portland Opportunities Industrialization Center also was focusing on advanced manufacturing career pathways and advancing equity. And that's again in Portland and Bend. Continue. Thank you. East Cascades Works also received grant funding. So this is a local workforce development board. The great thing about the strategic innovation grants is that the workforce development boards do not necessarily have to be the only person benefiting or the only entity benefiting from that grant. This was great because East Cascades Works hosted Behavioral Health Summit, and they also provided supervision, clinical supervision for those in the behavioral health system, as it can be really difficult to get that training, that training and mentorship. So thank you. Home Plate Youth Services was a workforce program in Washington County that assisted with youth who were unhoused. I'm hoping that you're seeing a little trend here where things are focused on workforce, but they're also kind of niche-y, for lack of a better term. They are really innovative, and that's the whole goal, right? We want to create innovative programs. Go ahead, next slide. The next one is Onward Eugene, which funding was used to expand and continue training people to be licensed home-based childcare businesses, which can be really helpful for those people because I think childcare specifically is a little bit of a challenge because there's a lot of rules around that, and helping guide people through the process on how to become a licensed home-based care provider is helpful and important. And they were expanding services to rural Lane County and Spanish-speaking communities to allow access into childcare. Opportunity Oregon is a program that operates resource centers and does career fairs for those who are inside of the prison system, as well as continuing to assist and advocate for folks once they get out of the prison system and trying to get a job. And that was statewide. I want to help kind of shed a light on what's happened geographically as well. So I'm going to try to remember to include where these programs exist. So Portland Youth Builders is obviously in Portland, but they help youth in the construction industry and helping them with some financial support as well as wraparound case management services. And the Contingent is also in Portland, and they were trying to increase their paid internship opportunities, as well as just expanding their programs. Okay, so this is the best part of the conversation. So I've been trying to get here a little bit quickly, so bear with me. What I would like to talk about is where we'd like to go in the future for these grants, and kind of get an idea from you all what you'd like to see. So for the first question is who will be awarded? What kind of entity would you guys like to see awarded? Like, would it be like a community-based organization, community colleges? It could be a local workforce development boards. We want to open it up to like all those type of people or all those types of entities, or what would you like to see in the who section? And the co-investment question is, would we like to require a co-investment as a part of the grant from that agency or elsewhere? I see your hand, Steve.
Yeah, one organization that is currently not within the workforce system or the scope of HEC is minority business associations,
Yes. Mhm.
which are the bridge between the minority contractors and firms and the prime contractors to work on meeting the aspirational goals on public works projects. And in our research as part of the Affordable Housing Initiative study, minority contractors and firms are the #1 entry place for minority workers in construction. And they do the on-the-job training. And so they're actually not in the official system, but that's where the majority of the workforce is, the entry point. So right now, the associations and their working with them don't have enough resources to upskill them in terms of recruitment and in terms of training of that workforce as they enter. So I would add minority associations. There's 4 of them. There's 4 key ones.
Awesome. I really appreciate that. I'm adding that to my notes now, so I'll be able to add that to the eligible applicants on that grant. Thank you. Todd?
Oh, thank you, Jennifer. Just to help me better understand, when you say who will be awarded co-investment, are you kind of getting at the notion, at least in part, of public-private partnership? So traditionally, I think these have been sort of competitive grants for the WTDB, as far as the strategic innovation grants, or as affectionately we call them SIGs. So they've gone out broadly. We've received, applications for award from community colleges, local boards, and other entities over the years. So are you saying, as part of the review and award process, that if, say, a community college partnered with a local economic development entity and a private sector firm, that they would be weighted more heavily in terms of scoring to be awarded? Is that kind of what you're getting at? Or?
Yeah, that was kind of the direction I was going. And I don't know how this group really feels about that. And so I mean, it is more funds for that project. If we can braid certain funding together, that would be great. But I really would like to have feedback about what folks think about that exact issue. Thanks for bringing that up, Todd, and making it more clear.
Yeah, well, hopefully I did. And any of you folks that are on, please, we'd love your input in thinking about that sort of strategy or other strategies in terms of how we best offer out these investments so that we hopefully get the best impact as possible.
Yeah, and I can tell you more about my goal too. So after this conversation, what I'd really like to do is create evaluation criteria that reflects for these grants, that reflects your all's goals and programs that you feel are most important. And that's my intention behind having this conversation, is informing that evaluation criteria. And I'm hoping to bring back at a future meeting so that you all can have some agency in what things are funded. I'm hoping that kind of helps. So if anyone, oh, I see Anne's hand up. Sorry about that. I didn't see that before.
No, okay. This isn't probably going to be super helpful, but I do think that because we just had this conversation about the good work the group's done on aligning the strategic plan with the governor's priorities, that I think if there's a way to meld those, and that's what we talk about, like that's the high level talking point that we were recommending. So this is not specific, sorry, but we are recommending blah, 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 because it aligns with the governor's priorities as reflected in our strategic plan.
Yes, I think that that's exactly kind of the direction we'd like to go. And that's the direction that the governor's statewide activities grant went. But I guess I guess the complication with that is that all those funds went to the boards instead of to community-based organizations or community colleges or minority business associations. So I think that this gives the opportunity to do exactly that, but in a more inclusive way. So thank you for bringing that up, Anne. I'm just going to make a quick note about what you said. Okay. So now that we're kind of talking about that, let's talk more about what the focus might be. We know that some of the governor's priorities and what those are. Would you guys like to chat about what pieces of those you'd like to prioritize? Okay.
Yeah, I think I'll just jump in real quick, Jennifer.
Okay.
Thank you for all this good work that you've done and pulled the presentation together. I think it's super helpful. I think it might be good for some of us to sort of take the time to reflect on this and then either have a conversation. I'm thinking maybe Sherry and Venkat in particular, in terms of, you know, what we think in a couple of days around recommendations, comments, feedback. And then we can send that over to you via email. And I guess I'd just also toss out that for those of you that are left on the call, if you have additional thoughts that pop up over the next few days or week, if you could just feel free to send them to me, I'll make sure I get them over to Jennifer so we can better inform this process. That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with that, Todd. I think that we just had a lot to reflect on today, and we may not be in the best headspace right at this second to give you, the best answers. So having a moment to reflect a bit might be better.
Yeah, I totally can get that. Venkat?
Hey, Jennifer, just wanted to give a quick thought, put some very quick thoughts in place here, because I'm also on the Semiconductor Consortium, and we've taken an approach to what Steve was saying earlier, is to have industry lead. So one thing that we've focused on in that forum is to collect the supply versus demand data. How many workers through this program are coming online, and what's the actual demand from industry? And therefore, you can look at the gaps and see what innovative approaches are going to go solve that gap. And so that would be something that is both strategic and innovative, right? So
Yeah.
it makes sense.
I love that. I think that's really helpful as far as like an evaluation tool for those who apply to the grant. I think that would be really, really helpful. And I did blast through the last strategic innovation grant, the grantees and kind of what they did. So I think I see Aaliyah put my presentation in a link form. So if you guys want to look at that and have more time to reflect on if you like some of those focus areas or if you feel any type of way about them, any kind of feedback would be helpful for me. Go ahead, Todd.
Well, thanks, Jennifer, and thank you, Venkat. Venkat, on the Semiconductor Consortium, in terms of the supply and demand piece that you just talked about, do you have anything maybe process-wise or document-wise that you could share with Jennifer in terms of what that actually looks like?
Yeah, so the metrics, the supply demand data was collected based on the semiconductor talent assessment that was carried out by the HEC. But I have a slide set I can send to you. And so the number of degree completers were put together today across the state, and then what the industry predicts based on the CHIPS and Science Act in terms of open positions over the next decade. And so the gap was projected over time. And then now we're working through some innovative approaches to try and fill that gap. So that's a good way to do it across any industry, I think. So it's very, very relevant. And I'm sure Steve will agree with that.
And I know that OED does have some 10-year projection data that I could help send out to everyone, or we can use as an evaluation criteria as we move forward. Steve, I saw your hand.
Yeah, so follow up on that. Yeah, what Ben was talking about in tracking, yeah, we're looking at doing that, like right now, looking at specifically the governor's affordable housing initiative, which is over 10 years, which means your fifth graders will be the apprentice in years 7, 8, 9, and 10. So then that pulls in, we have to focus on K through 12 because
Absolutely.
that's the continuing pipeline. So anyway, love that.
Okay, I love that. Since K through 12 students will be like leading those industries in 10 years potentially, or entering the workforce in 10 years, we want these grants to be inclusive of some K-12 programs. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, that's long-term labor forecast of what the needs are going to be based upon specific projects that we know and quantifying what the labor workforce is going to be. And then for the minority, what percentage of that turns to goals. So yeah, so that then allows you to now to do long-term planning and engagement in K through 12 to start developing that pipeline early and connecting.
Okay, I love that. Thank you. Awesome. I really appreciate that. It's really helpful. Does anybody else have any thoughts on literally any of these potential focuses? We still have some more time to chat about that, or if you all just want to digest that information and send it back over to me, that's totally fine too. I completely understand. I know for me, I take a little bit more time to digest some information. So that's totally normal.
I think unless we have, pressing other questions, I think it would be good to give folks some time to digest this. And if we can, I know the link is in there, but some people had to drop off. So if we can send an email with the link and with the questions Jennifer is, seeking response to, that would be great. But we really do thank you for this information and, for these efforts to include the board in this process. It's, we really appreciate that.
Of course. And Aaliyah, when you do send out my presentation, can you CC me on that so that everyone can have my contact information so that we can have a dialogue? That'd be awesome. Thank you. Okay, guys. Well, thank you so much for your time. I hope that the rest of your meeting is smooth. And I will see you all in the future at another one.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Of course. Thank you.
Yeah. So our next item on the agenda is also kind of a bigger one, which is looking at the board size. And we'd like to spend some time having this conversation. So perhaps we could do an action item. I don't know if we still have the numbers to vote, but to approve the number of folks on the board. Some of you may have been at, was it a previous full board meeting or was it the previous executive meeting where there was discussion about the WTDB being a larger board, one of the larger boards, and would the board be more efficient in a smaller or in a scaled down grouping? So that's kind of the question on the table. My understanding is right now we have 35 board members on the board with 3 ex officio. Is that right, Todd? That number right?
Yeah, 5 ex officio.
5. Okay.
Yeah.
So 35. And I don't remember if we know the average size of the boards in the state. Did we get that information?
Maybe a long time ago, but I think it varies widely. I think, for example, the state of Washington is grandfathered in back to either WIA or before, and they have a waiver from the Department of Labor in order to do this. But they have like 13 members, if I remember right. Other state boards that are considered best practice states have larger boards like Oregon. I think I think Minnesota. I think Colorado, Kentucky. So I think it's a mix, Sherry. I could float that to NGA if we needed to, but I think it's just sort of a mix of smaller, with Washington as the one that stands out across the country, and then mid, 25 to 35, and then some larger ones that are, 40 plus.
What about other boards in the state separate from our board? We're one of the largest boards of all the boards. Is that what I am to understand? I have heard.
I have heard that. Sarah Foster might have a better idea of that currently, but I think we heard that from Jennifer Purcell back when she was a policy advisor. I don't know. Sarah, Sarah, is that right?
Yes. You're one of the larger boards in the state, and I was just talking to our executive appointments manager about this, is having like part Senate confirmation, part like the makeup of the board is I don't know if it's not tricky, it's just complex. We'll call it complex. Because there's a lot of different parts and a lot of different processes as you think about the structure.
Yeah,
there's some in there's some in statute of like the types and the makeups and then what needs to be Senate confirmed and what doesn't.
Yeah, and I think the big distinction there, everyone, is just that private sector has to go through Senate confirmation. And this is highlighted, I think, in our bylaws as well. And then public sector are just many of those are mandated in WIOA section 101 in terms of who's there. We also have percentages around small business. We have percentages around labor, and then workforce entities that have to be represented on the board. So those are sort of the high level components and prescriptions around the board. It does get a little tricky because of one other item, and that is that the majority of the board members have to represent business per the federal law. So when somebody either rolls off, leaves, or maybe changes roles, it can impact the membership in more than just that space because of the percentages that we have to meet per the federal law.
And then just a little history, the board expansion really brought in more diversity around race, age, gender, and community. But, we at one point brought in more diversity on the board, which meant the board was bigger, right? And we were able to have more intellectual backgrounds, which, I personally think ended up helping the board and being an engine toward a lot of the things the board ultimately ended up doing. But given, the imperative to think about the reduction of board size, and we do have 5 ex officio. So, we could probably definitely make some limitation there. And then if we could make a spreadsheet of, as you say, the statutorily required, the percentage required, we can make it to see where we are. I guess that could give us a better sense of what a reduction would look like. My instinct would be, as people roll off, as their time ends, me personally, I'm not up for, telling people who are actively engaged, well, we got to cut you now, leave, unless it's folks who aren't, on the primary board right now. So I think in the ex officio space, we might be able to look at something in that vein. But for people who are currently within their terms and when it's time to renew, that kind of thing. My concern is not that we need a 35-member board. My concern is what is the sweet spot, and I don't know, but I do know that when this board was smaller, it was harder because we had a lot of people who, just their jobs. It's no harm, no foul, but they're busy and they couldn't be at the meetings, and it was hard to get committees, it just you have less people who are busy. It's harder to get people to do things. So having more people did give us the ability to stand up committees and do more things that it was previously harder to do. So I don't know where the sweet spot of that number is. And so I'm just offering it out for discussion. Yep, Venkat.
Sherry, can I tell you what AI recommends?
Mm-hmm.
So it talks a little bit about the business majority and the statutes by federal law and Oregon statute, and then it says Oregon's board incorporates labor, education, community organizations, and government agencies while maintaining business leadership. And third, it says you really want manageable decision making to the question of what's an ideal size board. And it says larger boards risk inefficiency, which are greater than 50 members, while smaller boards less than 25 may lack critical perspective. So it recommends a size of 30.
Look at you. You got your data. That's why you're you, Venkat.
That's awesome. What is so interesting for everybody on the call is that Sherry and I and Venkat talked about this. As you remember, we met after our last meeting in Portland. And I think after this very long conversation, I think this is right, Sherry. I think you said, I kind of like 30. I might be wrong, but I think that's what you said.
Yeah, just off the top of my head. And so there you go. But Venkat got to it. He did the math. He got the math to it. But so really somewhere between 25 and 30, under 25 is the weak point, right? Yeah, me personally, I think that having seen that, because you're pulling on a smaller group of people to do more things and be present, and just the natural attrition and work that people have. So if we were looking at, say, 30, somewhere between 25 and 30, and we wanted to start gradually, I mean, we could look at a couple of ex officios, and we could look at where people are on the on their term on the board and see who, where do we have people about to term off. I mean, we could do it that way.
And as you and Venkat remember, and maybe some others have seen too, well, Anne has seen this, and Ken, we do have a spreadsheet that tracks membership and term limits and when people will, roll off. So we can take that and work on that and then bring that back if that makes sense, Sherry, to make a decision if we aren't able to do it today. That kind of we can make maybe a couple of potential scenarios with the spreadsheet that show current what would happen if we, for example, eliminated the ex officio non-voting role. And again, the reason for that was to just get additional voices at the table that members thought would be helpful in the conversations, particularly in the community-based organization space, as well as other agencies that aren't mandated by WEO, but folks thought would be important. Some of that happened during the pandemic, one of which was bringing in OHA to the mix. So yeah, we can do a little bit more work and either bring back to our next meeting or send it out via email so folks have an opportunity to sort of noodle on it.
I think that's a good idea with some of the thinking, and that we're looking between 25 and 30 might be where we are looking, to maybe 30 to start, and then as we move, but it is going to require careful balancing. Let's say we did get to 25 or 29 or something, it will require careful balancing that we not lose the multi layers of diversity that we do have on this board. Um, so that is something we will have to be more thoughtful about. Because when I came onto the board, I was, I think at the time, the only African American person and the only person who had represented a community-based workforce group at that time. So it wasn't a lot of space for those voices at that time. So I would be careful of us not going back to that because we're not paying attention. So yeah, so I think we're just to tell folks we're looking for between 25 and 30 is the number somewhere in there. And these are some ways we think we might get there. I don't know, does anybody else we've lost several people, so we can't approve a vote anyway, but does anybody else have a burning desire about the number? Nope. Then Kat put the card down with the data, so I'm not going to fight that. So, all right, okay, so that's what we will do with that. Are there any?
I
Yes,
guess I do have one thought.
Yeah.
If there's space for it. I just think I think of the discussion today and how small this group is and how it can even be challenging to get a small. So I think that the utilizing the executive team is going to be like, I think continues to be critical to make decisions as a board, because even I agree that. And thank you, Venkat. I was so thrilled around the AI. I think we should make decisions using AI more. But I agree around the ensuring you have diverse perspectives and not getting too small and all of that. But then it can create, I just have seen it create challenges in decision making. So as much as we can kind of leverage the executive committee for decision making, I think is good.
Yes, and to be really transparent, I have to say, as somebody who gets frustrated with like a lot of like navel gazing decision making, the board overall has been really good about it. Like this has not been, when you say, I think a lot of stuff gets done. Like we don't go too far around in circles. Like larger groups might. And I don't know if that's just the personalities or what it is, but I think we function pretty efficiently. But yes, I think the executive committee, but the board overall, they're pretty action oriented. They're like, okay, we're done talking about this, which I appreciate. All right. Well, anything else for the good of the order? Anything? Okay. Well, I'm going to give you a good amount of time back. Well, I guess not that much. 12 minutes. 20 minutes? No, 12 minutes. Yeah, 12 minutes. But thank you all for hanging with us and for the changes today. And we will follow up with Lindsay and the HEC and everybody to see what we can put in place to finish this out. And then we'll follow up with Jennifer, which was a great offer. I think folks are just a little tired and not able to really give her our best. So we want to put that to the side. And then we will follow up on the board membership number. Okay. Thank you, Sarah. Thanks for joining us. I know you're super busy, so I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Okay, bye-bye.